Welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Tapon. I'm here with Margaret Sullivan. She has just written a book that covers her family's voyage. She had two children and a husband, and they together went to 29 countries all over the world. And you finished right in time. This was right before COVID hit you. And so you went on this worldwide trip and you're like, you guys are patient zero. Is that what people said?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, there were a lot of cracks made about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, what an amazing courage that you guys had, because both of you had good jobs in New York City. You had your apartment, you had your life, you had your routine, etc. But then you quoted somebody. I don't know if this came before or after the trip, and I thought it was a great quote. You said, you cannot child-proof the world. You can only world-proof your children. And to do that, you have to take them everywhere and teach your children, show your children, this is what the world's like.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not perfect. You're not going to always get your way. And things are tough sometimes. And things don't go your way. But you have to learn to deal with this. And that's a way to world-proof your children. I love that concept. So did that come before or after the journey?
It came after the journey, and I wish my friend who gave me this excellent piece of advice had given it before we left, because we took off, we were terrified, we're setting out in the world, we've never taken our children anywhere to travel before, and here we are with this very ambitious itinerary. And very quickly, day one, we learned that the world doesn't come with trigger warnings, nor does it cater to precious American parent ideas of safety and security and what children should or shouldn't be exposed to. A funny story, it was our first full day of a year of travels. We're in Kingston, Jamaica. We thought, perfect, we'll go to the Bob Marley Museum. There's a music studio there. We'll sing Bob Marley songs. We'll learn about his life, this very important figure. And it was excellent. But we had a 4 and 6-year-old with us, and we found ourselves at the end of this tour stumbling to try to explain the term assassination attempt, because the tour guide kind of came out with this is the spot where the men ambushed the house and attempted to shoot Bob Marley. And our kids were like, what happened? And so we still laugh about that, because it immediately showed us that every single day there were going to be moments where we would have to explain discrimination, war, terrorism, orphans, the US not always being the hero. We expected tough conversations maybe about poverty or about pollution, but this really blindsided us and showed us that we just need to be totally upfront with our kids, not beat around the bush, because it's there, it's real, and the more we can expose them to in a safe way where they know that they're, safe and with their parents, the better. And actually, it's set a precedent for frank talk in our house that has lasted today. It's really important, the way that we speak to each other, and we trust our children to grapple with big, difficult conversations, and they're not afraid of the news, or if they are, then we talk about it. So you cannot child-proof the world. It's the other way around for sure.
What did critics tell you? Other parents? I don't have children, at least I know of. And so what did other parents tell you and say, this is too much for a young child? Did anybody say that to you, or did most people were approving?
I think some people looked at our itinerary when we left and kind of raised some eyebrows. There were places on there that a lot of Americans would consider unsafe. That included, Kingston, Jamaica, or Johannesburg, South Africa, Bogota, Colombia, Cairo. What we ended up doing, and we just let our practical side take over. We just said, bad things can happen anywhere. There is danger everywhere. We live in New York City. I mean, we live in Lower Manhattan. There's stuff happening every day. There's the existential danger of climate change. There's the everyday danger of getting hit by a bus. We can't let the fear of headlines scare us off from these destinations. Unless you're talking about a war zone, most places you go are safe, and people are kind, and they're willing to help, especially if you have children. And we were at home asleep by 8:30 every night, not wandering around drunk at 2 a.m. in places as targets. And we ended up feeling completely safe, to the point where we even kept a running list of scary things that made headlines in the places where we visited while we were there. An earthquake, a bombing, a shooting, a terrorist attack, a helicopter crash, and where we would get messages from people saying, "Are you guys okay?" And we'd say, "Yes, we're fine." These things could happen
that
anywhere.
happens so far away. It's like, it's
Exactly.
like there's a shooting in Chicago and you're in New York. Are you guys okay?
Exactly. Well, we were another perfect example is we were going to Mozambique and we were going to Vilanculos, which is a beach, it's on the coast. Mozambique had just been hit by one of the worst coastal storms in 100 years. And there was mass devastation. It made international headlines. It was really a horrible, horrible event. And a friend said, "Please don't go." And we just thought, we looked at the map and we consulted with a travel agent who said, "You're fine." It'd be like not going to New York because there was a hurricane in South Carolina.
Right.
It's that kind of perspective. You just have to keep in mind.
What about the title of the book, Following the Sun? Where did that come from?
It's both literal and figurative. We plotted our itinerary around a path of seasonal warm weather. So we left in January from New York and we went straight down to the southern hemisphere to South America where it was summer. And then we just kept going. And as an organizing principle, it was a wonderful way to pack light. We didn't have very many clothes. We packed for one kind of seasonal weather. And then, there's a moment in the book that I describe where this is the more figurative meaning of the book, but we were in Indonesia. We're sitting there after a beautiful day. My son is wrapped in a towel. He's looking out at the sun. He's tired and sleepy from another great day together as a family. And this Beatles song, "I'll Follow the Sun," came on. And I heard him say to himself, "We're following the sun." And I started to cry and I'm not a crier. I started to cry because he thought, I know he was just repeating what we had told other people. We're following the sun as our itinerary. But the lyrics of that song are, they're surely, there may be rain tomorrow. I don't know the exact lyric, but there may be rain tomorrow. That's why today I'm following the sun. And it's just like, we don't know what tomorrow holds. That's why you got to do today what you can. You got to seize the moment. I mean, we did come home to a pandemic where nobody could travel for years. So it's a good reminder to do what you can while you can. Time is fleeting. And maybe future-proof against regret in a way by taking these adventures with the people you love.
Amen to that. There was one point, though, at the very end of the adventure, I think you were in New Zealand and you bought some parkas to go to Japan where you really didn't follow the sun. You seemed to be following the snow. What was that last minute? Was that part of the itinerary just to kind of like remind you that there's cold weather out there?
We saved Japan for the end because we wanted to go skiing in Japan. And we thought, what a fabulous way to end a year, a dream trip skiing in Japan. We'll save it for the end. In case someone breaks a leg, we won't, hinder the rest of the travels in any way, or we can buy the clothes at the end and that'll be it. And then as we approached the end of the year, we realized, what are we doing? We're going to wrap this huge year with a complicated schlepping situation where we don't speak the language and we aren't really even skiers. We're not sure where the idea came from. So it's a great question. About 8 months into the travels, we decided we need a soft landing. We need somewhere where we can spend a week reflecting as a family on what we just did and just prepare for re-entry. And skiing in Japan is not going to be that. But Japan was already on the itinerary. So we did this giant U-turn from having gone to Asia, then doing Australia, New Zealand, and going back to Japan. So that's how Japan landed on the itinerary at the end. And actually, New Zealand to Japan is one of our longest flights of the year. Turns out the Pacific Ocean is massive.
Who would have known?
Who knew?
Exactly. So what were some of the major mistakes, if you had to do it all over again, that you would have done differently? Because you were clearly, if you read the opening of your book, a meticulous planner. You're pretty good at that. And yet, of course, it's whenever you do something for the first time, you screw up. So
Absolutely.
What were your screw ups?
Oh God. Every day was filled with screw ups, and we actually have a list, but I think one overarching huge mistake that we made that we really learned from and we were able to correct because we had so much time was not trusting our instincts when it came to touring. We knew how we wanted to travel, which was more of a wandering, slow travel, kind of off the beaten path, meeting folks, just getting to know a place. And yet we succumb to the pressure to see all the sights at first, at least. And that, you come so far, we're really going to come all this way and not see this temple or take that tour. We're here, we may as well do it. And we always regretted it. I mean, our kids were little. We were sending them on these intense marches with long-winded tour guides who took us to places we'd never heard of and didn't care about, and couldn't really, the kids couldn't totally understand, and they whined for snacks and their feet were tired. We just thought, what are we doing? And yet we would repeat the mistake over and over. And at the same time, we did manage to discover this wandering, meandering type of style travel that we love, where you're meeting strangers and you're getting their recommendations and you're having an adventure that way. We just really battled all year finding that balance between the two. And now we're a well-oiled machine in that regard. We know how to spot a red flag. We know we don't have to see every tour. In fact, I love the example of, I live near the Brooklyn Bridge. I look at it every day, and every time I see it, it gives me a special thrill. I just think it's so beautiful. It's my favorite landmark. But I've never taken a 2-hour walking tour of the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't need to. It's there. It's magical. It's added to my life. And then I move on.
Kid-friendly tours you became very skeptical of that marketing term.
Oh, yes. We joked that we'd be through a tour that somebody had said, oh, this is going to be great for kids. And we'd signed up once again. And my husband and I would look at each other and say, you know what? Next time somebody says a kid-friendly adventure or outing excursion, we are going to demand photo proof that a 4-year-old child did this experience and liked it. Because I think in whatever travel operator's minds, a kid is, in quotes, is some precocious 11-year-old who has studied up on Egyptian history and is running ahead of the pack, asking curious questions about this era of what, I mean, that just isn't reality. So kid-friendly tours include animals. They are short. They might have a tasty treat. Music, perhaps, again, short, and with a really good guide. If it's involving a guide, I mean, a guide is like a good coach or a good teacher. They're just really hard to find. And when you find the gems, you hang on to them and share them.
Short, you define as what, 30 minutes?
I would say 30 minutes. I compare it to a child's birthday party. If you're booking an event space in New York City, is 45 minutes for a little kid. That's for the happiest moment of their year. No one can last 45 minutes. And so we were doing 3-hour walking tours in Egypt with 106-degree heat, this and that, Temple became a trigger word in our family that year. Right. I'll put it that way.
How do you balance? Now, one thing that you did with your kids in order to kind of quote unquote burn off their energy was you would schedule, I think, an afternoon in a park where they could just run around like idiots and just, burn off all their energy. Is that a pretty fair assessment, or did you do anything else that burned them out?
Absolutely. And one of the greatest things that we did, I just think you can learn so much from a playground or a market, more than any tour of a temple for kids. And one of the greatest things we did, and this was advice we got early on from another family, was we brought a soccer ball everywhere we went. And this was not practical because we had carry-on only bags for the year. And so we have the soccer ball, and I'm telling you, if you're a kid and you have a soccer ball, you've got friends. You can go anywhere, a plaza in Madrid, a back street in Vietnam, a rural playground in China, and someone will play with you. And most likely it's other kids, but sometimes it's grown-ups too. It's like they've been standing around all day waiting for someone to ask them to play. So, and eventually that leads to a conversation, or at least an exchange of some kind with other grown-ups, maybe even an invite to go then grab some food together after. You just never know. Kids that age are awesome. A playground is a wonderful place to see local life, meet local people.
So true. What about when you look back and you're thinking about having done this whole trip? What advice would you give to people who have children under 10 years old? What would you tell them?
I would say avoid letting the age of your kids put you off an idea like this. There is no magical age. And in fact, I have a middle schooler now, and I can see how the older they get, the harder this would be. Not impossible, but harder. Little kids, they just want to be with their parents all day. This is the greatest. They don't care where we're going. They don't care, Machu Picchu, Great Wall. We're with mommy and daddy. That's all that mattered. And they were so excited. So little kids want to be with their parents. Their clothes are small, which means you can pack really light. They're not self-conscious. They'll make friends anywhere. They don't have phones. They're not grumpy. They don't have strong opinions about where to go or what to do. And perhaps most important, besides the time with family, is that a trip of this length is such a huge percentage of their life that there is no homesickness. There is no longing for the way things used to be. They don't even remember. Our kids turned 5 and 7 that year. And, changing and moving all the time was just their new normal. In fact, to the point where we got home and they were confused by the concept of going to school every day, the same place every single day. That's how much it affected their sense of time is different than ours.
Now, one of the big impediments that people have with regard to taking such a long trip is the logistics of jobs and, apartment and all that kind of stuff. Now, in your case, you put a lot of your stuff in storage, and I think one of you were able to get a sabbatical. What career advice would you say to somebody who would love to do this trip with their family, but they're like afraid that when they come back, there'll be a pandemic and they can't get a job because there's massive unemployment?
Yeah. It's a great question. I 2 responses. One, I have a friend who has a very important, high-ranking executive role at a big corporation. And whenever I talk to her about this, she has 2 small kids, and she always says, the thing that strikes me about what you did and which gives me hope that maybe I could do this is you came back. It was 1 year. In the grand scheme of things, 1 year is so short. We look back at your last 10 years. Can you remember what you did in 2019? That, it's 1 year. You come back, you find your footing again. I would also say, we had all those same concerns. We before we committed to saying yes to do this adventure, we would lie awake at night fretting about finances, about jobs, all of those things, of course. And we had a friend who famously asked us a question that just stopped us in our tracks. And he said, the question was, what could possibly be more valuable than a year away with your family, time spent with your family? And it just was like, okay, this is not going to be a mistake. This is not going to be something we regret. Is it fiscally irresponsible? Perhaps, but it's also finite, and we will never, ever regret this.
Excellent. Well said. Well, Margaret Sullivan, you are the author of Following the Sun, new book that just came out. And each chapter is featuring a different country that you went to, 29 countries in all. And it shows some reflections that I think are useful to any parent and anybody who wonders, like, is this possible? And you show and you've proven that it is possible. And I commend you for that. And I think that you serve as a great inspiration. I hope everybody goes out and buys the book, learns a little bit more about it. Where do you suggest people go if they want to see more about you online?
Go to my website, margaretbensfieldsullivan.com, and the book is available there and on Amazon, where books are sold.
Great. I will put the link to that in the show notes. And again, thank you so much, Margaret,
Thank you
for writing this book.
Thank you very much. Okay.